Welcome to The Difference Engine, the show for tech founders, investors, and innovators.
Our guest today is Nigel Verdon, whose current LinkedIn profile describes him as outdoorsman / company builder / 3 times fintech founder with 1 unicorn / musician. For those unfamiliar with Nigel's achievements, he's founded and exited 3 pioneering category-creating firms: Evolution, sold to BAE Systems; Currency Cloud, that's the unicorn, sold to Visa; and more recently Railsr, exiting to a consortium of VC firms.
Born in Germany to an army family, he studied mechanical engineering at Warwick University, where he was a contemporary of a previous guest on The Difference Engine, Sumir Karai. A brief career in the automotive industry, working for EDS, followed before he found his way into financial services at Nomura, and the rest, as they say, is history. He also worked at Swiss Bank Corporation, now UBS, and was a director at Dresdner Kleinwort Investment Bank, both banks recognised for their innovation in technology.
Nigel Verdon, welcome to The Difference Engine.
Nigel, would it be fair to say that your entry to the world of IT entrepreneurship was a little delayed?
Yeah, it's a bit of reflection because I didn't have any real plans. And at school, I discovered music and rugby and playing guitar. I did end up failing my A-levels, and I distinctly remember calling my father to get my results. And he said, "I'm afraid you've basically failed them all." But he did offer to pay for Crammer to reset my A-levels, which was very, very kind of him. And reset it in a place in Oxford. We had an amazing couple of tutors, especially maths tutors, Swedish guy called Brad Severtson, who got all of us basically straight A's in our maths, because he taught us about the usefulness of maths and the history of people like Nicholas Copernicus and others, and made it interesting. He just changed the whole dialogue. He said, "I'm not going to teach you how to pass exams. I can teach you the first principles." And it's been a lesson all the way through, is that first principles, just learn the basics and you can derive everything.
And A-levels took you to Warwick, I believe. Tell us a little bit about Warwick, because the UK doesn't have MIT, doesn't have Stanford, but it's got somewhat of a reputation of being people are very technically adroit go there. We've got Imperial, that's where the DeepMind guys came from. We've got Cambridge, that's where dear old Mike Lynch came from. Tell us a little bit about your time at Warwick, what attracted you, and if it was this sort of breeding ground for future techpreneurs.
A couple of friends and I went around the universities doing the visits type of thing, and our basis was, our decision was based on how many bars there were in the Students' Union. And Warwick nailed that. It sounds a very glib way of looking at universities, but we also just looked at the courses and things. Warwick had a massive reputation for maths. It still is probably the number 1 maths university in the UK, possibly, and it's in top numbers in the world. And it had a very pragmatic course on engineering, known for pragmatism as opposed to intellectualism. Did masters as well in manufacturing, and that was an interesting thing. The real learning there was actually to help later on in financial services, because it's the operational things of putting a Vauxhall Cavalier, as it was at the time, out of Luton plant, for example. It was like 1 every minute came out of that thing, and so the logistics behind that, and learning about how Toyota was such an amazing company with the Kanban methods and cell manufacturing that the US academics put in as restitution, essentially, after the war.
Again, at this time, it struck me that you were really getting sort of soaked in the world of automotive. And when it came for you to finally leave Warwick, you went off to the unimaginable glamour of Vauxhall and their massive warehouse they have at Dunstable.
I actually worked for a company called EDS, which was owned by General Motors, so essentially owned. A guy called Ross Perot, went for US president, founded next to IBM. And it was the same sort of culture as IBM. A friend of mine got sent home for wearing red socks. And it was, you have to look like this, I actually quite enjoyed it because it just made him really concentrate on detail.
You lasted about 2 years before you got one of those sliding moments phone calls from a mate.
Yeah, I've had mate Johnny Peacock, rest in peace. Unfortunately, he joined EDS the same day as me. He was in the Luton car plant, Vauxhall, the Cavalier car plant, and we trained together. We used to go paragliding together, mountaineering and climbing and stuff together. And he phoned up and said, "Nigel, I'm leaving EDS. I've just joined a company called Goldman Sachs." And I had no idea what Goldman Sachs were. He just said, for the same engineering maths, they pay about 30, 40 times the same money. So I left and joined Swiss Bank Corp at that time.
And was there any regret that you'd left the world of hands and creating stuff? You're physically making things that are tangible in one job, and now we're in the world of intangible finance.
It's still tangible. I had a long philosophical conversation with friends of mine from the arts world and design world, etc. And you can, and there's the French writer Baudelaire defined what beauty is on various things that can be ugly, but they still be beautiful. And it was the design world, you can see it and experience it. So if you experience something built by Johnny Ives, even if you're blindfolded, you know that is something else. And the same thing with software. And you can see a thing of beauty that somebody's designed, implemented, written, and you can see an absolute pig's dinner as well. I was asked by a guy called Alex Dunstan, just saying that after I finished with Railzone and stuff. He is saying, "Look, Nigel, you're a maker. That's what you are. You probably haven't realised that, but you're a maker, whether it's in the physical or the non-physical world. A maker can be in different worlds."
Yeah, so I think you can have that philosophical view of making in IT, but there's that other bit of making which Paul and I have both, and you, of course, have experienced multiple times in our career. That's building a firm. So you were at Swiss Bank, got into the world of FX, and then you decided to build your own consulting firm.
I met a guy called Nick Borner, quite a character. He was working with me on the FX floor. And my two buddies, one Johnny who went to Goldman, and another guy Simon Lyon who went to Goldman. We all got chatting around this thing called the internet, which had just appeared. And at Swiss Bank, we'd just done the very first foreign exchange trade on the internet between Swiss Bank and Yuskobank, about 100 million cable trade. We set up Evolution. We didn't know it was called a consulting firm at the time, so we just said, "Hey, let's build a company and do something." So we had Swiss Bank as a customer, Goldman as a customer. So we just built that, and we realised what we were competing with was Accenture, or Answer Consulting as it were at the time, and others like that. So that's what it ended up. But we had product too, as well as consulting. We had people like Lehman Brothers and others who all use our equity research product, where it just did all the automation of research production, equity research production. I had no idea about marketing, positioning, category, or anything at all. Sort of learned some very good mentors on it. I think our first board meeting, we had a new chairman, his guy called Sir Robert Malpass, who was chairman of Eurotunnel. He just said, "Right, this is what you're going to make if you've got this amount of people." And we thought that's massively insightful. So yeah, because you just basically a bums and seats business and just get used to it. And the only thing that's different is train your people better, or just be friendlier, or something like that. But it's so easy to displace. That was a sort of, and they said he also don't make money while you sleep. So, hey, guys, think about that. So we did and sold the business.
So after leaving, having done that first adventure, it to me, looking back at your history, it didn't take long before you were off on another adventure. But what was the opportunity that you'd spotted this time?
I was brought into Dresdner Kleinwort Investment Bank by a guy called Dave Wenman. He dragged me in and said, "Look, can you help me turn the equities business around?" And I said, "Well, I don't know much about equities." He said, "Look, you built a business, you know FX." It was an interesting experience and learning. We turned that around from 90 million loss to 150 million profit in 18 months, stopping them doing stupid things.
You did have a fair bit of back to school to learn on the equity side of things.
It was. It's more complex because lots of the settlement you got extended settlement dates, you got dividends, you got all sorts of other bits and pieces to figure out operationally, and how to automate. And that was a precursor into when I left there. Was sitting in France, moved to France to exchange some money from, and I phoned up a company called HR Effects at the time. And there's a guy called Steve Lemon who then joined Currency Cloud. I was put onto him. I said to him, look, you're not charging me 2% on this transaction because I can see that the market's at about 0.01, 0.02 at best. And we settled on 0.2%, which is physical delivery. Then sent me a PDF by email, which I had to print out and then fax back payment instructions. And I lived in the village, lived 20 minutes walk from the village, so I had to go into the village to find fax machines. I didn't have one and didn't have a scanner in those days. And so there must be a better way of doing this. So that was the inspiration behind what was originally Currency Cloud, was taking the learnings and equities straight through processing and applying it to a retail world of deliverable foreign exchange.
That was also at the time when the idea of the API was starting to become current.
They used to be called SDKs, and then the word API so I asked Nick, what the hell's an API? This guy, Nick Borner, and he explained ourselves, we probably need one of those. And so we went around designing one, and the idea came up for the naming. I was in the first venture capital conference by a guy called Pavel in Bulgaria, capital, Sofia, and there's a guy doing this platform that ran 3G for countries that didn't have telco infrastructure. It's like a platform. He did it, and he had said he brought up the API word or acronym, and so I SMS'd. This is again pre-WhatsApp. SMS'd Nick saying, "Can you register the Currency Cloud?" Because his was something like the telco cloud, and that was it. That was early 2011. And then we launched it at TechCrunch, Geek and Roller. We won that as the best startup or something. And then we had two wonderful initial customers, Fido Bank and, as we worked at the time, TransferWise.
Essentially, that infrastructure you built really paved the way for a sort of explosion around fintech. And 10 years later, you found yourself with a unicorn, and ultimately exiting to Visa. What a journey over 10 years.
That was great, and I was also out of the blue because they bought Earthport, which essentially had the similar thing, just not very great technology behind it. So the rationale really was Earthport, pre all compliance coming in, had managed to build a global payments, essentially Nostro network all over the world, but the technology didn't really connect it together. And then Currency Cloud had all the technology and just needed a network because it was impossible to open accounts. So you slam those together, and that's what's called Visa Direct, essentially, if I remember rightly today.
In 2016, you founded Railsbank, which ultimately became Railser. Again, what was the inspiration behind that?
It was basically we still hadn't solved the problem that we needed a Currency Cloud, Wise needed, Revolut needed, everybody needed, which was programmatic access to banking. That's super simple. That's what we needed.
Is that what people think of as banking as a service?
Yes, no, called banking as a service, and just that very simple use case. I did a project for a bank called Catella in Luxembourg, and they were trying to figure out, they got a banking license, they had a payments card acquiring business, and they had all this payment rails and other stuff like Swift memberships and technology that they're trying to figure out how to make money out of, because they just sat there with a massive charge doing 3 Swift payments. So it's all like a week. And so we and a colleague did some work for them, and there's a guy called Gerald Kitchen, and if you remember, he was at WorldPay and a bunch of others. And a guy called Dave Nevitt, based South Africans. We did this work for them, which said you could create a payment a bank account utility and a bank account to bank account payment utility using your rails. And they're interested until the CEO resigned and a new CEO came in and said, I'm going to do credit cards, because he knew credit cards, and they did credit cards and then went bust.
Going through this adventure, it strikes me that implicitly or explicitly, category thinking has influenced how you built those companies. You really do seem to have some form of driving desire to reframe what the customer should expect in some distinct areas of the financial services you've travelled through. And you have built entirely new ways of satisfying their needs, so that they don't have to have a discussion about 2% or 0.2% on a currency transaction. I mean, is this about clarity of thought in the end?
It really comes back to the obsession that, like Jeff Bezos, use a glib example because everybody knows it. His apps, the obsession they have within the culture of Amazon, where there's always an empty chair in a meeting, which represents the customer, just to get the thinking in the head. So it comes down to the problem you're trying to solve, and what value and what the value prop is to the customer around that. And if the value prop is, I save you a pence, okay, let somebody else go and do that. It's not hugely exciting to build. So trying to find things that have a big delta of value, which is essentially a new category, as you call it. And you guys taught me category, because I didn't know I was doing category beforehand.
Hence my point about implicit or explicit.
Exactly. And then seeing, does that fundamentally shift either economics or experience or industry? Does it move industry along a different path that's just blocked there? Does it free something up? So that was the thinking. So the answer is yes. I did it probably implicitly, but mainly thinking about customer and the problem. And I just talk, because when we all knew each other, and when Fintech was sort of not given the moniker in Q1 2012, all of us were running around being told that you guys are never going to achieve anything. And so that was her thinking, and more formalized. Literally, you guys did it when we worked with you, saying this is about categories, and you introduced me to that classic book, Play Bigger.
Did you find yourself in the right place at the right time, do you think? Because you seem to have been at places where the impossible task was placed in front of you, thinking about your story about the Luxembourg Bank, etc. How much of it is luck and how much is it seeking out these category opportunities?
There is a serendipity thing, but I'm also a believer in not forcing. You know what I mean? When you can force into something, you can suddenly realise you don't keep the open mind of where something is. I'm working with a colleague, Dan, at the moment, where our open mind at the moment is to find the most boring thing that we can achieve that people pay for.
That again reminds me, I mean, one of the classic tools to develop category is the point of view. And I know we've laboured through those with you before, but I'm always reminded when I think about you, about, your focus on business, which is absolutely there. And it was one of the acid tests you applied while we were building that point of view, the SFW test. Now for listeners unfamiliar with SFW, it stands for so, and then any expletive you like, beginning with F, followed by what. So the Nigel Verdon so effing what test. Do you want to explain how this works?
Yeah, it came out of the first proper marketing person we had at Currency Cloud, a guy called Nazir Zubari, who's now the CEO of a Luxembourg house of Fintech, and a real character as a human being, a very good person friend, has become over time. And he was writing down some copy and stuff. I said, Nigel, look at this copy we're going to do. And I said, so fucking what, Nazir? I'm sorry. He has got the talent. He is so eloquent as well. I just go back to your heart and so as a human and stuff. And then his next bit of copy was totally on point, because he'd just been trying to be the marketing you get from marketing copywriting people who can write lovely English, and stuff, but can't get something that turns somebody's head and gets you in the door. And I learned that from the music friends in the music industry and others about the art is getting them in to the front door and then sell to them. Because you put something like a mannequin up, something like that, in a shop window, gets them in the door. Don't necessarily know whether they're going to buy or not, but the holidays get them in the door. So the art of communication is, if it doesn't mean SFW, they're just going to walk past your door.
To use that mannequin point, once you've got them through the door, you have to be clear about what difference engaging with you will make to them and their lives. And I'm also sort of reminded here, Stripe is one of the great European fintech story. You know, it's a killer payments company, and it is the category leader, I think, when you're talking about embedded e-commerce payments, because they didn't position themselves when they came out as APIs for payments. You know,
they had a great value prop though, which was accept payments online in 2 lines of code.
Embed e-commerce payments with 2 lines of code. Genius.
So that strap line itself was that almost became the sort of category. It became the sort of prelude into them being a category leader, and because they radically changed that category. They didn't, as you guys well know, they didn't incrementally change it. Beforehand, it was a pain to get set up, to get your acquiring bank, to get all the other bits and pieces you need to get in place, and the cost structure was there. The cost structure was opaque, and it was just like 0.2% or something, or 2%, and 2 lines of code. It was just like boom, done.
It changed the life of any developer that needed to add any form of payments to their product. You know, essentially, job done at that point. And as you say, they took the brakes off an entire industry. So can we just go back to the funding the most boring thing? What was it that made you want to do that as an idea?
So Dan and I were just thinking, look, because of the way interest rates are raising up, there's a lot of people looking for side hustles, and there's a lot of people who don't want to be contracting because IR35 is screwing you up, for example, in the UK and stuff. But you want to have a business that's generating stuff. A lot of people don't be working for the man. There is a sort of artisan movement of, let's say, call them tech builders, API tech builders, who are doing some incredibly boring things that people need to use. And so if you look at our expertise, it's taking API and interesting value props to market and building, especially Dan, incredibly robust, well-engineered tech that just works. Is we're looking at what boring stuff can we power, and how can we help people having to not learn to do the boring stuff get to market quick. We call it single feature businesses that are sitting on a robust infrastructure. So like Shopify enabled anybody to like, for example, this photo in this frame here was somebody on Shopify repurposes old plates from cameras into real nice frames. Shopify gave them that ability. So we're looking at something along those lines.
I was just wondering, even though you've got to this, another revolutionary idea, are you still bringing with you some of those early lessons that you learned at EDS and early on about focus and process and all those other things?
One of the big learnings is customers don't buy features. They buy a value proposition.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I guess you can't really complete your POV until you figured out what your MVP is.
We've been working on that one, actually. It's because we're looking at the POV, and there's like you've got a POV thesis, essentially. And the concept we've been working on is there's a bunch of tests and experiments you've got to do to narrow down to, right, that gets you to product market fit, MVP, product model. We call it first feature fit, if you see what I mean. And MVP, we've read as minimal viable proposition for people. You can then start shaping your point of view because it will evolve into a more substantial thing. So you take the learnings a bit further forward in the thinking process, but the rigor, and this comes back to another learning, the rigor of like EDS and the rigor of engineering testing and stuff like that, so wheels don't fall off and that type of thing, is a another thing that you should really do with your value prop. It's a piece of engineering to that's just personified in words.
Amazing insight. I think that's really valuable.
So I think what we can take from this section is first, everything you do can give you valuable experience to use in later life. The key is to do something as well as you can. Don't rush into it. Think it through and think it from the customer's perspective. Build your network, because that's where you'll find the opportunities, or they'll find you. And there's people to take with you on your journey, because that's a recurrent theme, I think, Nigel, from what you're saying. So I think that the sort of last thing that we have to remind our listeners, when they are building those businesses in this holistic way, is to always ask, so fucking what?
Think there are too many lookalike tech companies chasing the same markets? We do. We think it's because so few tech startups are able to build and lead their own categories. What matters most is to be different. Stop following and start building your own unassailable leadership position today. Working with the category design gurus at Categorical brings decades of differentiation expertise to your team. Book a consultation from our website today, and we will send you our one-pager detailing how to start designing your own highly differentiated category.
So, Nigel, you're primarily known as somebody that's steeped in fintech. That's certainly what we've seen with the bits of work we've done together. And it may come as a bit of a shock for those of us observing the current group of neobanks and in things like Buy Now, Pay Later and Klarna, etc., that a lot of these folks don't actually make any money. They just continue to burn investors' funds, trying to look like winners, hyping the possibility of IPOs, which may or may not happen. When Stripe going to IPO, we don't know. Would it be right to say that the hype around fintech is well and truly over in your view at this point?
The hype around a lot of cheap money is part of because interest rates have gone back up, and for foreseeable future they will stay at a reasonable high level. And you look at majority of venture capital over a 10-year risk-adjusted thing that was turning 1.5% to 2%. So for the risk you're taking is insane. And so, except the exceptional guys who knock the ballpark out, and they're more than double-digit, sometimes double-digit or more returns. But they're very, very few. They're category kings.
They are. And this is the power law, right, that the VCs are looking for. They need those returns from one or two companies, because it returns the entire fund.
It does. One wins, all the rest don't care about.
Would it be true to say that the real innovation in fintech, as we know, it stopped about 5 years ago? There's not really been anything new.
Yes, spot on. Around that time, it's because the banks were all hated after the credit crunch and things, and they also, the processes they had for innovation just weren't there. Most institutions now possibly fix their innovation, or fix their feature to market cadence, and have started actually caring a bit more about the customer as well. They may not feel it, but they have. So that moment in time when it was anti-bank, all the whole world had sort of smoothed down, because the banks caught up and stuff, and understandably have always been run by pretty damn good people. And then the amount of money that could get into fintech, lots of people are playing with stuff, but fundamentally it came down to a more innovative banking.
So, I mean, I know Paul and I've got a particular thing about neobanks not being a category. We just think of them as, at least initially, more efficient versions of big banks. There's some better, but there's really no different. I mean, possibly with the exception of Revolut.
Revolut is interesting. They seem to, if you looked at sort of law-wise of what they're doing, it's a lifestyle business. It's looking after your telco. I can get my data SIMs from them. I can get my other bits and pieces, because they know how to do stuff at scale. They can service you, and if you pay more, you get better services too, which I'm fine about. The product is actually pretty good. There's lots of complaints, but when you got something like 40 million customers, there's going to be noise around it. But it seems to be picking off things that some are finance, some are utility, and other things. So it's almost like a finance and services utility business, which hasn't been done before.
You have created 2 category areas in fintech, even though I postulated earlier that fintech stopped innovating about 5 years ago. Do you think there is any possibility banks and even neobanks will innovate quickly in AI?
What I can see it being useful for is there's so much waste and disconnect of silos and processes within larger financial institutions, and also within the view of the customer, the single view, like the Amazon's view of the customer, which is insane. They can make a decision, I'll replace your goods to Nigel because he always pays us, to somebody else, not because whatever, they trust will send something back. So that is where, I think it's an optimization to just like perhaps margin improvement more than anything, and service improvement. That's not changing a category. That's just doing better.
I'm wondering if the ability of AI to predict needs, though, which isn't really a banking thing, it's more like a customer experience piece. If that in itself will drive innovation that could create categories.
Yeah, there's the propensity to do something. So banking's actually been doing that for years, bizarrely enough, using propensity analysis, which AI just probably makes it a little bit more better in terms of you can make more use of your data rather than it being sort of like sequentially. You've got stuff that can do you call it genetic algorithms on things, which boom give you an outcome you wouldn't have actually ordinarily thought of. So it can give propensity to buy or something, and what is almost like a category out there of marketing shit that doesn't annoy people.
So just going to repeat that new category: marketing shit that doesn't annoy people. You heard it first on the Difference Engine there.
And so you almost like a category of companies that can just say this customer won't be, that's not relevant to them. That won't resonate with them. So it's like hyper personalization.
So looking back, if we think that fintech has been a bit of a bubble where we have, even the ones that have managed to get through and to innovate, looking for exits of various sorts, what might the entrepreneurs and the financiers learnt looking back at this thing, which was supposed to radically change finance?
Credit is still credit, and credit has its positives and negatives, which is it's a no shit Sherlock thing to anybody in banking. And one of the things I hope they've learned from is making credit be positive for people. That may be a learning, but that's nothing to do with tech. That's to do with economics and society.
Well, as we often point out, tech doesn't exist in its own bubble. It does exist within the confines of economics and society.
What I hope they do solve, though, because tech has massively accelerated fraud. And you've got these fraud villages in various parts of the world. I won't sort of name and shame, but and human trafficking to staff these fraud villages and stuff. So you've got a whole set of people abusing society and then using that, and the police can hardly get at them because they're not in the location, not in, say, UK or France or US. The fraud has been committed. So if there's a way of learning how to harness tech to shut these places down, or how to protect individuals, because there's lots of people talking about it. And I was working with a company called Get Silver, and it was about helping people over 50 protect them against fraud and things. And there's lots of people who have trying to do good things, because nobody's actually cracked it. And police can't arrest somebody who's trying to defraud the city centre of the resources. So if there's a way of using tech to detect suspiciousness in a way that stops you doing something, protects you, and there's a way to figure out how to shut things down, so you can create it up to an NCA, National Crime Agency, and other international bodies, things so you can shut the networks down. That would be super helpful to the finance industry, because the amount of fraud coming in is pushing the cost of borrowing, the cost of business, and everything.
As ever, technology creates its own problems and can create its own solutions. But I think just looking back on the history of fintech thus far, it strikes me that once a category exists in the minds of a majority, it could be a category that's pretty soon going to be over. And you're pretty on the money when you essentially are indicating that fintech's innovation engine has run down. It's probably had as much impact as it's going to have at this stage, and inevitably it's going to be absorbed into other stronger or more distributed categories.
That's a good summary.
I want to talk about something that Nigel brought up earlier in this episode, which is the idea of a more artisanal future. I think because of the sort of pervasion of technology, lots of people still want to be founders, despite, as we all know, if we live long enough, the pitfalls that choice can lead to. But equally, lots of people don't want to be founders, or they want to be a different sort of founder. But has that always been the case, Nigel? Or what's happening now that you're observing?
Looking at this as a trend, this is my colleague Dan Bruce and I, before even deciding what we're going to do, have been just trying to look at the trend. Post-COVID, there seems to be I don't want to go back to work, not to work trend, but I don't want to go back to the office thing. But one of the things the office does provide is a sense of community, which is important. Sometimes a sense of purpose if it's a good company and things. So we're just looking at, there's people who have wanted not to work in, say, the urban areas, but work, and then did move after COVID and stuff to countryside. And that is a sort of an anti-urbanization or artisanal trend. Can you help them have a sense of purpose, community, work, and stress, and also get rewarded for that? Is there a new type of, instead of being a crafts person building, say, for sake of argument, pottery, just as a glib example, is there a sort of software stroke engineer, sort of tech artisanal type business where people can be in a place I love, Whitstable, for example, and have a community there? I noticed they've actually, it's not a WeWork, but a similar sort of thing in the back of the church. Generate good income. And then you're not wasting 4 hours of your day possibly traveling, 2 to 4 hours a day traveling, the stress of traveling, the stress of work. You're getting a sense of purpose. You're also delivering something that's super useful for other companies, say big co or even startups, to do it. And if you look at what's needed for that, you can't do it in Salesforce because it's like so many features, you just don't need all of that. There's a way of being this mini artisanal infrastructure to know to get stuff out super quick without having to do this massive stuff. And some of these may become big companies. So is there also then a market? And there is a market, because some people sell their sort of tiny little API business for 60 grand, which is a great result for them.
This is a very, very big idea, Nigel. I mean, what you're postulating here is that the entire development of Western society over the last 400 years, where we're seeing this constant drift from little artisanal enterprises in the countryside, people drifting into the cities, concentrating into bigger and bigger industrial units in bigger and bigger cities, has come to the development of a technology where we're at such a stage now, we can actually use that technology to almost, and I'd hesitate to use the term go backwards, because it's not going backwards in terms of a societal point of view, but it is going backwards in terms of this apparently inevitable movement towards the cities, towards soulless jobs, and so on and so on and so on.
It's interesting because that's that movement to artisanal and individual contributor, if you like, work. It goes against a lot of what you see from the pushback from the oftentimes the larger organizations like consulting firms. I saw this morning there was a story in the FT that I forget which one of the big consulting firms is not just mandating people back in the office, they're also going to do proximity detection to make sure that you're actually not like mentally present, but physically present. So it sounds like we're gearing up for a big fight here.
I mean, you've lost a huge amount of trust both ways when you have to check into your desk, because this is going back to timekeeping. But if you create it's almost like a new industry of micro, they've called it technology microservices, but it's more micro APIs and stuff, and you can assemble stuff from that. They're creating a new, coming back to your guidance on categories about creating a new type of economy based on this, sort of like micro feature economy, or the artisanal engineer economy, or something along those lines. I think you can start to help regenerate. I know we're all into sustainability and nature. That's one other thing which I know all of us on the call are here. So all of that can actually, because there's a massive issue that we do need to rebuild countryside and nature in general, and also the healing powers of nature. I spend a good number of hours per day getting into a meditative state, just walking.
I think there's something in that, though, isn't there? That we think that our so-called flexible lifestyles have improved our life experience, but haven't we a lot of us have just become prisoners of the machine, just as much as anybody operating a loom in a textile factory in the 1800s. It looks like our relationship with the workplace is going to change. Our relationship with work itself is going to have to change, and certainly even our relationship with ourselves. Thank you for listening to The Difference Engine. If you want to learn more about Nigel Verdon and any of the topics discussed in this and all other episodes of The Difference Engine, then you can go and read our blog at becategorical.com. If you're a tech business and you have a category problem, then we can help. Get in touch with us via the show notes or at hello@becategorical.com. And remember, don't be better, be different.